Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our newest How I Doctor sponsor, Savaro. Savaro is a top telestroke and neurology company that was built to fix one of the most predictable failures in modern medicine, getting timely, consistent access to a neurologist when you actually need one. Their team of board-certified neurologists deliver rapid video response, clear decision-making support, and continuity from the first exam all the way through treatment planning and management. Hospitals working with Savaro see faster door-to-needle times, fewer transfers, and measurable improvements in patient outcomes. And because Savaro was built by physicians, the workflows actually match real-world medicine. If you need stronger, faster, and more predictable neurology coverage, visit savaro.com to learn more. And now, let's get into today's episode.
To the extent that we de-skill, you can see us entering a death spiral where the AI is actually better. You don't want the human weighing in because the human will screw things up. I think it's the fundamental question in medical education. And I have a chapter on my visit at NYU where we just grappled a lot with, do we continue to teach the fundamentals? I think the answer is for now, absolutely, because for now, not only looking over the AI's shoulder and saying that's a good answer and that answer is wrong, but also knowing what to put into the AI and knowing when I need the AI and when I don't. But I can see a day where, yes, we will de-skill, and it's okay because it's a skill we're no longer using.
Welcome to How I Doctor, where we're bringing joy back to medicine. Dr. Bob Wachter is a hospitalist, professor, author, and clearest, curious thinkers in American medicine. He chairs the Department of Medicine at UCSF, literally coined the term hospitalist, and has spent the last decade publicly wrestling with healthcare's hardest problems: quality, safety, burnout, digitalization, and now, spoiler alert, the promises and perils of AI. Dr. Wachter is world-renowned for many things, but I'm particularly delighted to talk to him because he's a hometown hero. He tweeted voraciously during COVID and was an international, national, and certainly local voice of trust, caution, and moderation for many of us, myself included. Bob has written several books, including one of my favorites, The Digital Doctor, about electronic health records and the digitalization of medicine, and now A Giant Leap, How AI is Transforming Healthcare and What That Means for Our Future, which is coming to a bookstore near you. I just finished reading an advanced copy of his book yesterday, and it is, like his last book, a quintessential tome to put AI in medicine into context. Dr. Bob Wachter, welcome to How I Doctor.
Thank you, Graham. It's a joy to be here. I really enjoy your show.
Thank you so much. Bob, I'm just going to dive right in, and it really stems from the end of your book. I really want to ask you kind of an emotional question, because this is an emotional topic, I think, for a lot of doctors, is like, how do you feel now at the end of the book, having written this book? And then maybe how did you feel starting out? Were you scared of AI? Were you excited? Were you just curious?
I think my feelings about it were influenced by my last book, The Digital Doctor, which I wrote 10 years ago, which I wrote out of pure frustration. It was just like we were waiting for EHRs for 20 years. Now we finally have them, and everybody I know is grumbling about them. So the book is is sort of a pissed off, hopefully fair, but kind of grumpy book about unintended consequences, about how things didn't go the way we thought they'd go. At the end of that book, there's a chapter, I think it's 27, and people said to me, "Who wrote that for you?" Because it's like sunny and optimistic, and it's kind of, this is all going to work out. And I said, no, I actually, as grumpy as I was, I think it's going to work out, but I think we need new and different and better tools. So when first used ChatGPT on November 30th, 2022, a little light bulb went off and I said, this is it. Part of what we needed was a tool that could understand human language, could read my note and your note, could speak back to me or a patient in human language. And I guess the other reason I was optimistic, and this is sort of a funny way of thinking about it, is I thought these tools are unlike anything we've seen before. They're remarkably impressive. They're not perfect, obviously. But the healthcare system is so screwed up that we need some help. In healthcare, I can't find a doctor or a nurse or administrator or a patient who says, the system is perfect. I can't imagine anything that would work better than this system. It's like everybody says the system is so flawed in every possible way. So my optimism, and that is how I landed. I landed in a much more optimistic place than after the last book. And it was partly because these tools are really cool, partly because they're getting better every day, and partly because I absolutely think we need this, that the system is incapable of doing what we need it to do without AI like this. So I'm, probably an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, I mean, I describe myself as a cautious optimist. I was in between night shifts when ChatGPT came out, and I made an account probably at 6 p.m. before I had to go into my 9 p.m. shift. And the first hour of my shift, I'm just showing people on my laptop, "Hey, you guys, look at this new
Look at
thing."
this.
I mean, immediately, I think you and I are similar. Immediately, I was like, "Oh, damn. Oh, okay." I'm immediately starting to the fireworks are already in my head of how this is going to impact my care delivery and my patients, and, just I got so excited that first night, and it's kind of never stopped.
Yeah, and over the course of, a year and a half of doing the research and writing it, the other thing that gave me hope is I'm already using it, as I'm sure you are, in ways that maybe aren't quite transformative yet, but are meaningful. And that there's no prior technology in healthcare like that sort of infiltrated its way into my daily work. I was just on the wards the last 10 days. I used open evidence 15 times a day. These tools now are out there and we're seeing what they look like in real life in ways that I've never seen a technology that's done that in healthcare. We had the ability for the last 20 years to have really good digital tools that allowed us to ask single questions. What is the right dose of apixaban for a patient with a DVT? That kind of thing. What we could not do is I have an 84-year-old patient with lymphomatoid granulomatosis who comes with a fever, a white count, an infiltrate, and a creatinine of 3.2. What do you think is going on? Like, any existing tool would have sputtered on that, 10 nanoseconds into it. And now we have tools that are not perfect, but, I make the point several times in the book that as Biden liked to say, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And the alternative was generally nothing. So it's certainly better than nothing.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things you touch on, which I'm so appreciative in the book, is de-skilling. And I wonder, as somebody that uses generative AI many times a day, do you think it is or will make you de-skilled? Will you lose some of those skills for looking up information, or will you become too reliant on these models and less able yourself to trust your own judgment, do you think?
I think the real answer is we don't know. I think that's a real tension in this, and not just in medicine. I mean, when I do the best job I can do writing a paragraph or two, and then I say, Claude, which is a great editor, can you make this a little better? Is that making me better or worse, or both? Probably a little bit of both. I mean, some de-skilling is fine. I mean, I no longer know how to read a map, and that's fine. I don't have to read a map. We are de-skilling on the physical exam. Is that bad? A little bit, but I think we often romanticize the physical exam, and I would trust your bedside ultrasound over the physical exam in many cases. So, some of it's fine. One of the big fundamental questions I grapple with in the book is for the foreseeable future, we're going to have AI, whether it's in decision support or scribing or whatever that is good enough to be useful but not perfect. And therefore, the system will be the human in the loop, will be the AI does something, the human looks over its shoulder and then opines. And to the extent that we de-skill, you can see us entering a death spiral where the AI is actually better. You don't want the human weighing in because the human will screw things up. I think it's the fundamental question in medical education. And I have a chapter on my visit at NYU where we just grappled a lot with, do we continue to teach the fundamentals? I think the answer is for now, absolutely, because for now, not only looking over the AI's shoulder and saying that's a good answer and that answer is wrong, but also knowing what to put into the AI and knowing when I need the AI and when I don't. And nobody's got time to put every single issue you grapple with. Think about your next ER shift. And for every patient, you're going to have to go to GPT or open evidence and put in a prompt and wait for the answer. The waiting room would be 9 miles long. So it can't work, but I can see a day where, yes, we will de-skill, and it's okay because it's a skill we're no longer using. As you know, that study that came out of the gastroenterologist is really interesting and provocative. In 3 months of exposure to AI-enabled colonoscopy, they got less good. So de-skilling's real. It's going to be important. I think it's just going to be super important we be thoughtful about this. And I think from a curricular standpoint, taking too much fundamental knowledge and medical reasoning off the plate too soon, that would be the biggest error I think we can make.
I'm so glad that you wrote so much about education, both obviously as a professor of medicine at UCSF, and just education is the area that worries me the most about this. My version of it is in the ER, I use my Gestalt for so much of my clinical practice, deciding what test to order, whether to order tests or not on, somebody with they fell on their elbow, right? Do I get an x-ray or not? Do I get this blood test or not get a blood test? Like, how hard is the human being going to work at their own medical, I don't know, practice, judgment?
You could even make it, as you talked about the ER, I thought, sometimes it feels like the CT scan has become another vital sign.
Totally.
They get
Airway
intrigued.
airway breathing CT scan,
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so there's some de-skilling likely
Sure.
going on there. And you can argue the converse, which is that, I'd rather I have the actual accurate information about what's really going on in the patient, and that augments my database. And I saw that this patient that didn't really have classic symptoms of a PE did have a PE, and that's expanded my eyeball test. I think it can cut both ways. But I think from a medical education standpoint, I guess I think we have to really work hard on creating structures and maybe AI tools that get the trainees to weigh in first before getting the answer. And that's not an absolutely novel problem. And same thing is true when you're an attending physician with a student. You can just give them the answer, or you could say, "What do you think is going on?" And the better teacher says, "Tell me what you think is going on," before he or she weighs in. I think in some ways the same thing is true here. Will we build AI tools that basically say, "You tell me, you human, tell me what you think the diagnosis is, and then I will tell you what I think"? I think that would be a better tool for med ed than a tool that just gives you the answer. Will we do that? I'm guessing we won't. I'm guessing we'll say, well, that's an unnecessary step, and why shield the student from the best possible information? But I think something is lost there, and I think we're
Yeah,
grappling with this elementary school teachers are grappling with this, writers are
totally.
with this. I don't know which way it's gonna go, but I worry about it a lot. It sounds like the
Yeah,
same.
I do too. The I do think we have some examples in medicine. In the ER, we have video laryngoscopy, but you can turn the screen away from the person, so they really have to just practice using a regular Macintosh blade, and then if they're really struggling with the airway, you can turn it around and really give the video.
Hey, my naivete, Graham, I did not know that Apple made a blade. That's good to know. Yeah, how many of your colleagues do you think do that?
When we're working with a resident, about maybe 50-50. I think when it's just us and, we have UCSF residents that rotate, but most of our shifts, it's just us practicing without them. I think we're going right to video.
Right. But you think it's
Yeah.
sort of standard or standard practice to do that with a trainee?
I think it's good practice because, every so often, maybe you go to a place that doesn't have video laryngoscopy. Maybe the scope isn't working. The cable got cut. I mean, the ER is a messy place to work. Shit happens. So,
Well, but I think that's part of the de-skilling thing is, are you trying to retain the skill because you actually will need it?
right.
And the Graham-Stain example is perfect. You don't need it.
Yep.
And other than romanticism, there's no point in continuing or history to teach you that skill. Are you trying to keep the skill going because you might find yourself in a practice setting, or, either you're in rural whatever, or the electricity's out?
Yep.
I mean, you can argue the Waymos de-skilled last week when we lost electricity in San Francisco. Every one of them stalled in the middle of an intersection. But do you train for that, for that long tail? I don't know. I remember interviewing Vinod Khosla, the famed venture capitalist. For my last book, I was sitting in his very beautiful office on Sand Hill Road. And he was at the time making predictions that every doctor would be out of business within 5 or 10 years, which of course was wrong. And I said, and I was talking about the eyeball test. I said, we have this thing where we eyeball a patient. And one of the things we learn in very subtle ways is sick versus not sick. Triad. And he said, well, the computer can do that. And he said, what are you queuing on? I don't know, the look in their eyes, the sweat on their brow. He said, machine vision can figure all that out, and it'll be better at it. First of all, you're probably not that good at it. You think you're good. Second of all, the machine can ultimately do that better than you can. And I was sort of pissed. And I said, I'm sure you have the entire day, you have Stanford MBAs come in here with their pitch decks. And the same beautiful graphics and return on investment, and they're articulate. And one of them you say, I'm going to invest, and the other one you say, I'm not going to invest. And I said, aren't you using the eyeball test? He said, probably, but I don't think I'm as good as I think I am. And eventually, whatever it is that I'm picking up can be digitized and can be replaced. Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's harder than they think.
It is. It is. Bob, you write a lot about Waymo. Obviously, you and I both live here in this city where I can probably see 5 Waymos driving by me on my street right now.
Yeah.
They are everywhere. I thought of you yesterday when I was walking my dog yesterday morning. So I'm walking my dog right by where I live. It's downhill. It's very steep. Lots of traffic because it's cutting through the city. And I see out of the corner of my eye a car coming, and I look up, and because I'm on my phone, of course, and then I see that it's a Waymo, and I look back down at my phone. It was totally unconscious. I've gotten to the point that I totally trust it. I did look back up consciously. I had to force myself consciously to be like, no, I should still look. I can't trust it that much, but clearly my unconscious brain has already decided, oh, I see that it's a Waymo. I am no longer nearly as concerned because that is literally the intersection I've almost been hit by human drivers and a cruise vehicle probably 5 times. And I do think that we will get to a point with AI where physicians and patients will trust some AI system, whether it is, an open evidence model, a ChatGPT model, something that doesn't even exist today. I think we will get to that point where we're just like inherently, oh yeah, this thing's right.
I already do kind of. I am comforted when I sort of make a diagnosis and then I put it into open evidence or Gemini or whatever, and
Yeah.
it comes up with the same diagnosis. I feel better. It was like, okay, it looked over my shoulder, just the opposite of the human in the loop. It's the AI in the loop. It's like my answer comports with its answer. I feel better. I have to say, Graham, when telling that story, I mean, you missed your opportunity for fame because Waymo has not yet killed a human, and if it killed you, you could have had your
Just
name
a cat,
flashed
just a
forever.
cat so far.
Just a
Yeah.
cat, right?
Yeah.
Famous cat of mission. So yes, I think that that day is going to come pretty soon where we learn to trust it. And that's an old problem in technology. People trust the technology sometimes over their own instincts and over their own eyes. And, as usual, sometimes that's right and sometimes that's wrong. But you're being completely rational to trust that the Waymo is going to stop much likelier than the human's going to stop.
Bob, I want to ask you some questions about kind of the healthcare system and how it's interfacing with AI and just technology in general, especially thinking back to the digital doctor book as well. I wonder if you have a theory as to why the healthcare system, health systems, payers, pharma, everybody is allowing the technology companies to develop this technology for them as opposed to doing it themselves.
First of all, it's not your business and it's not our business. So we're probably not going to be very good at it. Second of all, and there are parts of it that are our business, which is how does it work in healthcare and understand the workflow and all that. And you are doing some stuff, we're doing some stuff here. Mayo's, all in on this. But the scale of both the expertise and the data centers and all that kind of stuff, I think it'd be silly for us to say we're going to build it all ourselves. Um, I just think it's not what it sort of reminds me. I mean, your organization has periodically looked at social determinants of health and said, a big predictor of how patients do is housing. So we're going to start building housing. And I'm like, we don't even know how to do healthcare really well. Like who who makes us think we can do anything in housing or education or these other domains? So I think it's actually important not to have too much hubris about the domains that we're good at, the domains. Now that said, Google, Microsoft, Amazon companies with unlimited brain power and money have never succeeded in healthcare. And the reason they don't is they don't understand how healthcare works. They're too far away from the action to understand the people and the culture and the workflows. So I think that an organization like yours and mine, I think, are going to be dependent on companies that are doing this thing called building an AI tool for a living, but also going to be very dependent on once we bring the tool in, what does it mean for our workflows? We have to test it on our patients, not the generic patients that were tested in the development of the model. So I think it's going to be partnerships. But yeah, this one, that feels like an easy question. It just feels like this is just big, too hard for healthcare organizations, even the biggest and most competent, including yours. I think trying to own all of the elements of production here would be a big mistake.
Well, I just want to read you a quote that I really just appreciate you having this perspective as a physician because I don't think it gets represented well by the technology companies. So you write, while AI-based tools might effectively perform these tasks for a healthy patient at home, I think you're talking about maybe physical therapy AI, with a sports injury, I found it hard to imagine them doing so for a frail, elderly widower who spoke only Mandarin and lived in a second floor Chinatown walk-up. I could not agree more. I think that is some of the tension I feel between the technology companies and health systems and healthcare workers is we know that healthcare has to work and be available for 100% of human beings with all of the filters and subfilters and social determinants and all the little pieces that can make healthcare challenging versus I guess I feel like some of the technology companies want to build a widely profitable and successful tool, but they're not trying to get to 100%. They're perfectly fine just saying, yeah, we're going to get 95% of the way, and we're not really going to care about the other couple percent.
Well, they're in a different business. They've
Yes.
been, and it's hard to argue, with the success of Apple or Google in marketing tools that I think people generally find make their lives better, but they're going to be making a purchasing decision out of their own pockets, which means the people can afford it are going to be a certain types of people with money and often education and some digital facility. And we have patients like that. I think I saw one a couple of years ago. You know, I mean, when I think about the patients I see on the wards here, I'm sure you see in the ER there, that description is much more likely to be apt in the average patient than a healthy 30-year-old biker wellness person who's
Yes.
body hacking and taking this protein this and goes to yoga 4 times a week. Those patients are fine. They don't come into the healthcare system, and so we need tools that serve everybody. And I think the tech companies, it's just not in their DNA to understand that.
Yeah. I think the other challenge I see around AI is just its ability to scale. Obviously, that's incredibly powerful. I think, I think there's like 800 million ChatGPT users already. And then if you have a poorly trained ENT surgeon, they can harm patients. But if you're an AI and you scale to 800 million people, you can potentially harm a lot of people in a second if you're not doing this successfully. And so,
I think the first use case there is the mental health chatbots, where we are beginning to see some examples of them doing stuff that's just bad and heinous and harming people. And they can do it at scale, 100x or 1,000x of what any individual bad psychologist or psychiatrist can do. And so, that's an area that begs for some guardrails and some regulation. On the other hand, there are also millions of people today that will use an AI to get mental health assistance, probably, net positive way. Try to find a psychologist or a psychiatrist in San Francisco, and if you can, try to find one that's less than $400 an hour. I dare you. So, it's it's the don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. One of the things I worry about, we're talking about Waymo. The reason you should have been confident crossing the street is Waymo has not killed anybody yet or run over anybody yet. But as you well know, Cruise, the alternative company, didn't kill the woman, but dragged her 20 feet, injured her quite badly. The company went out of business in a year. And so, in some ways, that's partly why I think it was really quite wise for healthcare organizations and the tech companies to start with things like scribes. Start with low hanging fruit, where even if you screw up a note, you're probably not going to kill anybody, and really not get too aggressive trying to get onto the probably more ambitious and important use cases. Because if there's something bad that goes off the rails, and I think the mental health chatbots are where we're seeing this, the backlash will be quite profound and could set the field back, by 5 years.
could not agree more. Bob, do you have a sense for how this should be regulated? I've looked at some of the laws from Sacramento trying to figure out how to regulate this stuff. It's kind of hard to even define properly without becoming overly broad or overly narrow.
The chapter I wrote on regulation was one of the hardest chapters to get right, and
Yeah.
I think I did as well as I could do, but the ending is totally unsatisfying. It basically says, "This is hard, and we're gonna have to work hard on this." It's like, okay, duh. Uh, not only do we not kind of have the regulatory framework in place. We don't even have the right structures. I mean, it's not like the FDA has to do this thing in a new way because AI is different than approving, a statin or approving, an obesity drug. That structure does not work. It doesn't work because we never had a thing that if you say today it's not ready for prime time, tomorrow it could be great, or vice versa. We've never had a thing where its use at UCSF might be totally different than the way it's used in a rural hospital 100 miles from us. So, we've had things where it provides decision support as baked into a mammogram or a CAT scan. Never had anything that is providing decision support in real time on, is this a PE or not? Or is this patient septic or not? And if you start regulating that, how's that different than regulating a textbook, which I use to get information and then I make a decision? So much of this is local, and the regulation may not be at the level of the tool, but may be at how Kaiser Permanente and how UCSF are judging whether the tools are ready for prime time. How are we testing them on day one? How do we test them on day 365 to be sure that they're working? Do we regulate them the way we regulate a doctor? Or, is your AI tool board certified? It's not like I was chair of the ABIM. It's not like we figured that out either. I think a really knotty set of questions. My bias and if you think about what's happening in Sacramento, not happening in Washington, but happening in a lot of states, nobody's really thinking about healthcare regulation. My bias is the risk of overregulation is higher than the risk of underregulation. That this thing is so potentially useful that, and we're so unable to regulate it effectively. And the regulatory systems that we have are so sluggish and are going to be so far behind. And that your system and mine and others have a lot of built-in guardrails, the malpractice system, our reputation, professional conservatism, that I would worry more about very heavy-handed regulation saying you can't use open evidence for helping you make a clinical decision because it hasn't been tested in this population. I think that's more dangerous than letting me use it and knowing that I'm going to make the final decision and all the regulatory framework around me as a doctor kicks in if I get it wrong. And because so much of it is about how it's implemented locally, to hold the tech companies liable for something bad that happens in a hospital if the information wasn't used correctly. These are just really tricky issues. And I wish we had a political system that was capable of tackling really hard issues, because this, what it means for jobs these are, brutally wicked problems. And, you would hope that we would be having rational debates, including in the political system. I think we're having a lot of debates outside the political system, but to the degree that the politics have to kick in around regulations, I have very little confidence that's going to happen in a good way.
One of the other big questions I get from physicians every time I talk to groups of physicians about AI is this going to take our jobs? Is this going to replace us? I'm curious, now that you've talked to people, written a book about it, where do you stand on this and maybe why?
I have a daughter and son-in-law who are pulmonary fellows here. And so I like there to be jobs for doctors in the future. I think the fact that I don't think it's going to take a lot of jobs for doctors and nurses is actually quite important politically. Because I think if it was, I tell tech companies all the time, you did Waymo, but or you did Uber, physicians are better lobbyists than taxi cab drivers. And we won't say we're worried about you taking our job. We'll say you're going to kill somebody.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I think the complexity of medicine, the number of cross-cutting issues and people and diseases and the amount of coordination and all of that, and I'm pretty optimistic about it. It was impossible for me to see how this fully replaces what a doctor or a nurse does. I do think it will make us more productive, which means at the end of the day, we may need fewer of them. But if you look at the history of medicine over the last 20 or 30 years, as the needs have grown, we've just hired boatloads of non-physician, often non-nurses, care coordinators, quality people, billing department, prior auth writers, NPs, PAs. I think, I can imagine, for example, in primary care, there's a lot of primary care that's pretty algorithmic. And I can imagine that you get your blood pressure and your cholesterol managed by AI. And you can see a doctor if you want, but it's going to cost you an extra, $1,000 copay every year to do that. And I think in some ways it's analogous to how we do our travel or our finances now. Some people want the human, but we'll have to pay extra. But I think when you get to the kind of care that you deliver in an urban ER, the kind of care I deliver taking care of sick people in an academic hospital, I don't see it replacing many docs. The fields that are, this is not rocket science, the fields that are at greatest risk are radiology and pathology, the fields that are about visual pattern recognition. But we can't hire enough radiologists.
Neither can we.
And, this is at a time where we all thought the radiologist would be toast by
Yeah,
now. Um, so what happens? I think that over the next 5 to 10 years, the improved productivity of the AI doing a first read and doing it in a reasonable way that's in the workflow allows us to make do with the same number of radiologists. 20 years from now, probably we need fewer, although I'm guessing we'll invent new techniques that require radiologists to do new
sure.
things.
Yeah, I mean, the other question people will ask is just kind of from the business and corporatization of medicine. Well, if the AI scribe is making me 10% more efficient, is my health system going to expect me to see 10% more patients? Or if the AI's taken all the easy patients, if I don't get an ankle sprain that shows up to the ER anymore, and
Yeah.
I only get the complex 95-year-old who only speaks Urdu and was just discharged from the hospital and has had 3 surgeries at 3 different hospitals,
Yeah.
but I'm still expected to do the same level of work and provide the same level of quality. That's going to be really hard for a human to provide.
Yeah, well, the history here is not comforting. The
I
history
was
here
going to say it's not great. It's not great.
would say that, the leaders of the corporate enterprise will just the hamster wheel will spin that much faster as they have paid for efficiency tools that you are using. I think that the savior here is that part of the return on investment, why is every healthcare organization bringing in scribes? It's actually hard to see that it's making you more efficient, but it's become a huge satisfier for physicians, and hiring and retaining physicians and nurses is expensive. And so I think in their self-interest, I think we'll end up with sort of a 50-50 bargain where 50% of the improvement in productivity is repurposed into the hamster wheel spinning that much faster, which I think is in some ways fine. If,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, I think it's more fun and interesting to take care of a patient than for me to spend time documenting or reviewing a 600-page chart. I think if those things can be taken care of, I'm willing to pay that. All right, I'll have to see an extra half a patient in the
Sure.
half day, but I also get half of the time back to actually practice medicine better and make eye contact with my patient. If that's the trade-off, I think it's okay, but we're gonna have to be vigilant about that because the forces of nature would have the hamster wheel spinning that much faster.
Yeah. Yeah. Bob, a few rapid fire questions in our last few minutes here. Should there be something in medicine that we never let AI touch?
Never's a hard word.
Yeah.
Discussing with a patient that they have a fatal disease or have cancer or have some dread disease, I can't see it
Yeah.
anytime soon. I don't want it anytime soon.
Bob, finish this sentence. The biggest mistake medicine could make with AI is.
To take N of 1 cases of bad outcomes and damn the entire enterprise based on those.
Yeah.
Just remember, we're not talking about comparing it against the perfect system. We're comparing it against the current system, which is far from perfect.
Which is far from perfect. And every physician would tell you it's far from perfect.
Every patient would tell you that too.
Yeah. And Bob, last question. If a physician only remembers one idea from your book, what should it be?
Eric Topol wrote a blurb, and he said makes an eloquent case for informed optimism. I think the tonal piece of it is as important as any kind of factoid or use case or whatever. I think being optimistic that this is actually going to make medicine better, safer,
Yep.
more satisfying for everybody, patients and clinicians. And I think ultimately less expensive, although we're pretty good at preventing that from happening.
Yeah.
So I think having that attitude then opens you up to, it hallucinates. Well, yeah, it did a lot 3 years ago. It does a hell of a lot less now. Just being open to being thoughtful about trying it in places where I think it can make a difference.
Yeah. I just think there's tremendous possibility in how it can help us with our days. The more I use AI, the less scared and intimidated of it that I am, and the more just impressed with my own human brain. Like that my brain is able to do this thing that the computer that I think is really smart really struggles with.
You're much younger than I am. I'm more impressed with your human brain than mine. But yeah, I get the idea. Humans add a lot of value. I think we shouldn't minimize it, even as these tools get really impressive. But I think we also have to be be honest and say there are things that we're not that good at. And there's just so much in healthcare that's just dumb. It's just wasted time. We're not taking full advantage of what humans are really good at. And I think the AI, I think, really will help us do that.
I love it. Dr. Bob Wachter, thank you so much for being with me today on How I Doctor. Bob, where's the best place to find you, find your book that's coming out?
Find me. I'm mostly in my office, but I'm easily accessible online, and I have a Substack now where I'm sort of posting some things that are newer. That obviously I wrote the book, much of it 6 months ago, and things change quickly. So Substack probably over Twitter. The book's going to be everywhere after February 3rd, and in all the places you can find books these days. So
amazing. I highly enjoyed it. A Giant Leap: How AI is Transforming Healthcare and What It Means for Our Future. Dr. Bob Wachter, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Graham. It was really fun.
Thanks for joining me today. For interviews with physicians creating meaningful change, check out offcall.com/podcast. You can find How I Doctor on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll have new episodes weekly. This has been and continues to be Dr. Graham Walker. Stay well, stay inspired, and practice with purpose.